Hi, my name is Steve Wilson. I'm here to talk about my journey from the church I was raised in, the LDS Church, to leaving that church and becoming an evangelical Protestant, I guess you can call it. I'm a little new to it, 20 years. And part of the reason I think we do this, there's a lot of parallels. You're going to hear a lot of parallels between my journey and other speakers. I've been listening for about 3 months and coming to this meeting. And I appreciate them all, and I do see many parallels, so that's why I mentioned that. I had several versions over the last couple months since we had to cancel last month. I had time to think about it, and they were all wrong. I kept preaching and drawing parallels and describing the Mormon religion, and finally I said, like 30 minutes in the talk, I'll say what happened. Well, I kind of reached the point where I'm just going to say what happened, and then maybe I'll draw some conclusions at the end, but hopefully it comes out good. This is my first live version of it, not electronic version, so we'll see how that goes. I turned it into an outline. So again, my name is Steve Wilson. I grew up in California, as everyone here probably did, or at least everyone in Utah lately. And I was, just like many people that speak here, firmly established in the Mormon Church. I'm not going to use the new euphemism that church wants their members to use because I'm not a member. So I'm going to probably call it the Mormon Church or the LDS Church. But my father was, both of my parents were, father was pioneer stock and my mom was pretty entrenched in Utah culture in Provo. And by the time I got to be a teenager, my father was pretty high in the church. He was a stake president. That's like a, what do they call that in the diocese? Like a bishop in the Catholic Church. And he was a city manager too, so I grew up with a lot of privilege, as the liberals like to say. And I remember as a teenager, you always question your testimony. Would I ever leave the church? Could I ever believe something different? Do I really believe in the church? And I said, no, I could never leave the church. I'm a stake president's son. So that's kind of a silly statement for an adult to make, but it made sense to me back then. It was part of my identity. And of course, the Mormon culture does encroach on a lot of the culture. It is a cultural phenomenon. Mm-hmm. So it really made sense. I went to seminary as a high schooler, which means an hour a day, learning church doctrine. And it really did help prepare me. It's a really pretty good program, I guess, to help indoctrinate people into any religion. I remember as a child I had a lot of faith, naturally a lot of faith. For example, I tried to walk on water. I came home from Sunday school saying, they told me you can do it if you have enough faith, and I have enough faith. So I went to the swimming pool with my brothers and father and said, I'm going to do it, and I dropped into the water, of course. You didn't think I really did, right? I learned a lesson that, if you don't need to do something, it's just for show. But the point stands. I didn't try to move any mountains. I remember trying to go into tithing supplement as a 10-year-old. I had my 50 cents or whatever, and I tried to give 90% of the money to the bishop. He says, no, keep it at 10%. That was always easy for me. That might explain some of the later events. I'm not stingy with money. I remember hearing my mother using a cuss word after talking to my father on the phone. And Mom, don't you want to get to heaven? You can't get to heaven if you're cussing, And she says, no, darn it. Not if I have to live with that man and get criticized by him. They divorced about 25 years later. But I was just incredulous that anyone would ever do anything to not get to heaven. So I don't know when I was saved. I kind of suspect it might have been around that time, but I'm not a doctrine. I'm not a doctrine person, so I don't really understand that. I'll explain a little more about that later, about getting saved. So as a Mormon, you get a patriarchal blessing. Any of you that have been Mormons know about the patriarchal blessing, and it's supposedly a revelation about your own life. And it said I should learn many languages so I could preach the gospel. Obviously, you need one language to preach the gospel as a missionary, but I learned about 5 languages by the time I got to my mission and got into college. And I was pretty fluent in them. Portuguese, Spanish, German, French, and Chinese. I could at least converse in Chinese and a little bit in German. The rest of them I could converse pretty well. So I did a mission in Brazil. I actually requested Brazil because I read that they had many different languages there. I was actually stationed in a town that had a lot of German speakers originally, next to a town called Blumenau. This town I was in was Joinville. So there were, Italian speakers there and German speakers among the elderly. So that kind of worked out good. They gave me where I wanted. When I got to the Missionary Training Center, that's where you learn your language, or for a shorter time if you're going to an English-speaking mission. And I realized, I think a lot of other elders, missionaries, realized if we're going to be saying we know the gospel is true, we better find some way to get a testimony really fast. So we had lots of hours of study and prayer and everything. And I think I finally gave up. I think a lot of other elders just gave up and said, I'm just going to say I know the church is true, because there's not time to really flesh it all out. So that's the assumption a lot of us use. I can't generalize to everybody else, but I pretty much lied through my mission, because you convince yourself that, yes, the church is true. You got to say it. It's part of the social pressure. So I got to Brazil, left Brazil. My mom was busy at work giving me away to a woman that wanted to convert to the Mormon church, and she basically promised her son if this woman would convert. So while I was in Brazil, my eventual wife converted to the LDS Church. My mom said I picked her because she'll be able to keep Stephen in line. Now, I thought about it years later, you always think a little differently, and it's the word control. She would be able to control me, and she's good. She was good at that. She was feisty. She still is feisty. Another example of that, my mom and I got into arguments years later. Like, she thought the woman should always control the finances because of her husband. Her husband, my father, gave her a $40 a month allowance to buy groceries, and back then that was not a bad amount of money, but he kept her at a string's length, an arm's length, and controlled her finances. Well, my mom said, no son of mine is going to do that to his wife, so she backed her in the control issue. Actually, I was going to say this later, but I was granted by my wife $40 a month for my hobbies. Music writing hobbies, synthesizers, microphones, software, computers. It was $40 a month, and that was in the 80s, so it's not that far from current money. And that was what my mom and I were arguing about at that time. I have a recording of that. So anyway, my wife and I, when I got off the mission, I remember hearing a rumor 2 weeks after I arrived, she's getting angry because I hadn't invited her on a date. I had a lot of people to visit and everything. I said, if you know my personality, I respond to anger. I'm easily manipulated. So I asked her out on a date, and date every night for the next 40 nights, and asked her to marry me. We decided to have a large family. She had 7 children in her family. My parents had 7 children in my family. And so it sounded like a good number. We knew how to deal with 7. We thought we did. And of course, there was not a little bit of church influence in that. Not just my parents. Her parents weren't Mormon. But there was a strong preference back then. Women don't, I remember, I think 70s or 80s, don't work outside the home. You're committing. The prophet said, don't work outside the home. You're get away from the typewriter. And any of you old enough to remember that will have heard about it. So that was a lot of it. And my wife didn't want to work anyway. After a short job, she realized she was not for public consumption. She wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. Okay, I'm moving light speed here. I wanted to be a linguist because, for obvious reasons, I learned all those languages. I had studied linguistics at BYU, enjoyed languages. It's still one of my first loves, music and languages. Luckily, I kind of failed the test to get high scores on the GMAT, the Graduate Records Exam. That's a long story. Anyway, I got up at 3 in the morning that day because I was a walk-in. I was trying to save time. And by the time we got into the building, I was accepted to take the test. But when I filled out the last multiple choice answer, I realized there was a discrepancy. I was on number 49 and it was on 50. So I had to erase it. Anyway, I got 80 percentile. In linguistics, you can't be anything but the best. I would have to go to Berkeley or UCLA, and I was not accepted into them. So I still wanted to go into linguistics. Went to Guatemala with BYU professors, linguistics professors. And while I was there, a lady that was hosting us, LDS lady, was pregnant, and my professors were saying she's a breech, and everyone seemed to know what breech means, and I'm sure you guys know that, but I was a 22-year-old college student, and I said, I think I want to know more about medical issues. This seems like a pretty powerful profession. That kind of knowledge is going to affect you all your life. It's going to affect your family. It's going to affect me when I'm my age. So I switched to medicine, and I was rejected from the best schools anyway for linguistics, so I had to pick something. And I thought it was much more altruistic than sitting there describing ancient or foreign languages. So my idea was, well, all these foreign countries, America has plenty of doctors, why not become a traveling doctor and use my languages? Made sense. That changed later. I changed to radiation oncology for reasons I won't go into, but I was kind of converted. The rest of the world doesn't need people like me to condescend to them. So got to medical school in New Orleans, Tulane, and my dad paid for the first year, and then he sent an emissary, my brothers, saying, Dad really never promised to pay for $10,000 a year for medical school. And back then, that's nothing nowadays, even for undergraduate, but that was the second most expensive medical school in the country. So I took the hint and applied for the Army and got the last 3 years of medical school paid for by the U.S. Army, tuition and stipend, living expenses. So that really helped. I came out of residency in 1988, moved to active duty in the Army at Tacoma, Washington, was my first duty station. At, what was it called? Trickler, forget, Madigan Army Medical Center, yeah. By that time, the fact that there was child abuse in the home was abundantly clear. Husband abuse was starting to occur. I was told, and a lot of my children were told, you're stupid. You can't do anything right. And when it's one-on-one, you believe it. And the children too, obviously, they're very vulnerable. Early on in Tulane, she threatened the oldest daughter, 2 or 3 years old. If she didn't obey, she would leave her in a dumpster. And she left her in a dumpster and walked away. And Child Protective Services was called. And they interviewed the wife when I wasn't there. I was at medical school. And from then on, she said, kids, keep it quiet. You don't want to lose your parents. But it didn't change her. I tried myself to change her, put some pressure on her with the weak skills that I had. But it just got worse. Controllers don't give up easily. And it's not really a control issue. In my opinion, in retrospect, it's not really an abuse issue. It's a control issue. It's a way of managing a large and enlarging household. I'm not trying to give excuses, but it was a technique, a management technique. The worst I saw right before divorces and separations and things was in front of me. I think she did this probably partly to impress me, who's boss around here. But she took the he was 8 or 10 years old. He lives next door to me now. She took his head, put it, excuse me, I want to be audible, put it under the level of the toilet seat and flushed the toilet. So it was probably splashing in his eye. He's a tough little kid, he still is. But that's just one example. I'm sure there was many more examples when I wasn't there. Most of it was surely emotional abuse. Especially our most intelligent son was constantly told he's too stupid to do anything. Now he works for Microsoft and earns more than a doctor does. But it still couldn't wash the clothes right. You can't do anything right. Stop thinking you're so bright. You get the idea. And I mentioned the $40 a month allowance. So at this point in Olympia, Washington, when I was working in Tacoma, I was, let me go background with the Mormon Church. We're not supposed to talk about temple commitments, but one of them is you give all your time, your talents, everything you own and possess, anything that you will ever own in the future to the church, not to God, not to Jesus, to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I will never give away this promise. Rather than do so, I would allow my life to be taken. So it's a blood oath where you promise the church gets first pecking order in your life. Presumably your family gets second pecking order. In your career, even if you're a doctor, taking care of cancer patients, comes third. And it's not really just your career, it's your patients. And that's a lot of what my story is about. Okay, so I, like a good little zombie or soldier, I put the church first. They asked me to be assistant scoutmaster. Takes 10 or 20 hours a week. You're on campouts, Boy Scout campouts on many of the weekends. And I love that kind of thing. I like getting away from the house for obvious reasons. But there was a career conflict with my career around that time. My personality is not really suited to be a leader. I was the chief of a radiation therapy clinic. That's my specialty. And I'm too much of a nice guy to call people on their mistakes. And there were a couple of signs that our rogue physicist was doing something illegal, hiding things, changing things. I didn't pursue that, and it hit the fan, and he was interviewed by a federal agency and threatened with charges, and that was very embarrassing to the chief of the Army hospital. And it made the front page, I believe. There was only a $5,000 fine, which in a $92 million a year hospital is not a big deal, but it's the embarrassment that is the issue when the Army gets in trouble. So there was a chief of my specialty in Washington, D.C. that told me she would be visiting. They wanted to evaluate my leadership skills, see if there's anything that could have been done differently to prevent that mishap. Well, I'm already committed to go to Boy Scout camp that week. And that's the church. And that comes first, no matter what. And it didn't even occur to me anything different. I just thought of this week or last week, I could have canceled the whole Boy Scout camp for our troop, and we just wouldn't participate. It would not have worked if I didn't go and they asked other parents to go. I knew they wouldn't give up a week or even a couple of days. I didn't even focus on that much. I just knew I needed to keep my church duties sacred, and holy. So I said, I'll be there on Thursday of the week. You can interview me, but for the rest of all the other interviews and all the chit-chat that goes on with the interview, do it without me. I was the chief, That is really the thing that deep-sixed my career in the Army, completely. When it came to be turned from major to colonel and colonel to lieutenant colonel to colonel, that's where it stopped, because I had a bad rating because of all that. Okay. In my rating, they called me, Dr. Wilson is a great crisis manager. I didn't realize till later, until I saw the comparison ratings, crisis manager is a negative term. You wait for a crisis and then you take action. Okay. So one of the people that helped pull me out of that career disaster was a colonel. She was a lieutenant colonel then in my specialty in Hawaii. And I would soon be transferred there. You do well to remember her name. It's Merle. Okay. And we kind of did a pretense of all my patients. I would run by her. She would give me a stamp of approval, say, "Yeah, you're doing the right thing. You're doing the right thing." I wanted to rebuild my reputation, my level of confidence. And she bought it. She was quite appropriate with that. But she knew some of my skeletons in the closet. Okay, before I take you to Hawaii, not literally, a little diversion. I write songs. In the middle of Boy Scout training, I was asked to set some goals about my future, and I said, I'm just starting to get all these songs in my head. I want to start writing them. I had been arranging other songs like karaoke, equivalent to today's karaoke, and I'd started to get my own songs in my head and some lyrics, and I'll play 3 of those in a minute. So I had met one of my patients that was writing lyrics, and we tried it for maybe 6 months or a year, and tried co-writing. And I did learn through that, not only can it destroy a controlling marriage, a marriage that's built on control, but you have to get fairly intimate in some of your discussions. Because it's like having a bishop's interview every week or something, or every day. You're playing with ideas and trying to build reality scenarios in a song. You don't want an unrealistic song. So I tasted that. I saw the conflict that occurred in my marriage from that. And I'll get to part 2 of that in a minute. Her name is Kathy. So just on looking at the big picture here, we can see that in some ways, this is what my brother argues, he's a member of the church. We can argue that I was kind of set up to fail. The church set me up to fail in some ways, that priority thing. My personality set me up to fail. I wasn't a good leader, and I don't need to be a good leader to be a good doctor, but it ruined my career. I never made colonel. Let me detour just for a second on that, on how that was beneficial. When I get to Walter Reed Hospital later, I thought about appealing the bad rating, or the bad ratings, however many there were, so I could be promoted to colonel. And so I went to the commander of the hospital, the chief of staff, which is the top doctor in the hospital, not the commanding general. And I said, can we possibly think about appealing the bad rating I had here? And he said, don't worry about it. You're 3 years away from graduating, from retiring. You'll get a job as a real doctor, and then you'll make some real money. Good. And he meant it. He was serious. Don't worry about potato chips when you have a full course dinner. Let's not focus our energy on that. Very wise. He had been in private practice. He knew about private practice. But anyway, back to that. So I was kind of set up to fail career-wise, which one more reason that was a good thing. If I had ever been promoted to colonel, I would have lost my skills with patients, because they elevate you more and more into the administrative realm. You become like, the chief of the Secretary of Defense or something. You're studying government, how the government works, how the government thinks. So when I got out of the Army, I was able to connect with patients. I had not lost my skills. I may not get to this, so I'll also say that if I had not failed so devastatingly as I did, it would not have been catastrophic enough to send me from Hawaii to Walter Reed to get retrained. And because I got retrained in modern radiation therapy, which we did not have in 1985 when I was a resident. Okay, so that actually fixed all the problems. I was able to practice until age 65, I think. Okay, I was a very good doctor in radiation therapy because of that extra training and that extra demotion, figuratively. So anyway, some of those factors are the reasons I failed, and my brother argues that if I hadn't had certain personality defects, I wouldn't have needed the church so badly. I wouldn't have fallen so hard, and I wouldn't have noticed the church was not sustaining me in the fall. And it might have been good enough. The Mormon church might be good enough for some people that have naturally born great skills and didn't set high goals. I set very high goals. I was very confident that I could do things right. And I had 9 children. I did all the things the Mormons want you to do, and I thought I could juggle it all. But sometimes it just falls apart. And in fact, the name of my talk is because it all fell apart, it all came together. Okay, So I did a little scatterbrain there, but there are things I had forgotten to say and I wasn't going to say. So in Tacoma, I was going to leave the Army after 3 years. I told you I owe the Army 3 years. Why was I going to leave the Army? Well, you make triple the salary in private practice. Who wouldn't leave the Army, right? I didn't even think about it. Everyone else is leaving. I'm up to 3 years, and where am I going to go? You know? And I got this sentence in my head. I didn't write it down, but I remember. I was thinking about retiring, and obviously it was God who said, "You want money? I'll get you money." And I was immediately kind of embarrassed that I was doing it for money, because I obviously was, even though you don't think about it. So I said, no, I don't really want more than 100 grand. I was making, with 7 kids at the time, 100 grand is more than enough. I had paid off my house. I kind of forgot about that other sentence, "I'll get you money." But when God says something, He keeps His word. Okay, so that happened after the divorce, luckily. So then they moved me to Hawaii with the family. And the same woman who helped rehabilitate my career a little bit, knew my skeletons in the closet, Colonel Merle Sprague, was free at speaking her mind. And it was very clear she was not satisfied. In fact, by the end of things, she was writing memorandums all the time. Dr. Wilson, Colonel Wilson, didn't show up at the right time. He didn't prepare for his things. He went to the ER that day when his blood pressure was 70/30, and he's a hypochondriac, things like that. So that was when it came to a head. But earlier on, she was pretty clear that she was not taken with my organizational skills. I'm not a natural organizer. And I was thinking, there's a job opening in Maui, a nearby island, and maybe I should get out of the Army and ask the guy that works there if I could work with him. And another sentence came into my head. Don't you worry about Merle. I'll take care of her. And then a sentence that sounded like it was not, that felt like it was not supposed to be heard by me. Like it was whispered or something. I can't tell you why it felt that way. But that last sentence was, "She's in my camp. She's in my camp." And she really is. She's a good woman. But maybe he didn't want to tell me that because it's judge. Or humans are not supposed to know people's hearts. But I don't know why. But it felt like I wasn't supposed to hear it. But the obvious thing was, again, don't get out of the Army. Stay in the Army. This time it wasn't about money. It was about discipline. But if everything had not fallen apart, it would not have come together. And I wouldn't be, I would still be a Mormon right now. And many other reasons. And the child abuse never would have stopped. Okay, I didn't realize by that time the career was already hopelessly ruined. You know, I never made it to colonel. I started noticing it was crashing down all around me, but at this point God was saying, stay in the Army. And I'll just tell you right now why one reason that was a good decision. When you're sick in the Army, deathly ill, and you can't work, they have to pay you. They have to go through proceedings and all kinds of things. And 6 years later in Washington, D.C., I spent about a year being too sick to work. And they had plenty of doctors. They had 5 doctors. And I was one of them, I guess. And at that original time in Hawaii, I was too sick to work a lot of that time. And they put you through the motions. They put you through the, what do you call it? When you're going through the ringer. But they keep paying you while they evaluate if you should be kicked out or not. One of those processes is called medical boarding. If you're too sick to work, they kick you out. And that takes 6 months. And at the end of that, they said, you're not too sick to work, you're a doctor. You just sit on your behind all day long and see patients. So that was fine. But that kept my income stream flowing. Okay. It wasn't as big as the private practice, but in private practice, I would have been history, you know. I guess using my disability insurance. Okay. So, now that I mentioned songwriting, I had written with one songwriter. I didn't plan any exit from the marriage, obviously. I didn't really understand I was being abused. I just thought I was stupid. and I thought it was impossible to fix the child abuse problem. Okay. Well, I found a listserv. That's an email distribution thing that goes to songwriters, and I joined it, and I started sending out cassettes. If any of you are old enough, cassettes to other lyricists mostly, saying, "Can you fix my lyrics? Can you do better than I've done?" And I was pretty good at music. And I met a woman. So before I talk about the woman or any of this, I'm gonna see if I can connect my MP3 player and play 3 of those songs. The first one kind of gives you a feeling
ready for connection
of what it's like to live in a house with child abuse and chaos. Too many kids. Okay.
connected.
Tide is rising. Good level.
Children dying and the old men cry with fear. I can see the devil trying to come closer, signs appear. I see your face wet and sweaty, blood of children in the drain. Lightning strikes, it's bound to get me as the sky reveals my pain. Tide is rising, we're too young to die away. I can't tell if we're too near or far away. Tide is rising and the future's clear. The cross is burning and the end is near. We're going under, got to get away from here. Hear the thunder, there's no error, ain't no hiding from the rain. Look on my face betrays terror, got to break free from the pain. I look your way, beg for mercy as I softly call your name. Help me break free of this curse, I know I'll never be the same. Tide is rising, we're too young to die away. I can't tell if we're too near or far away. Tide is rising and the bank is deep. I know I'm slipping cause I'm in too deep. I'm going under, got to get away. I see all the children dying and the old men fall in fear. Now I know.
It cuts off because the reel-to-reel tape recorder ran out of tape. Okay. That tells you how old. My soon-to-be girlfriend, the girl that I sent, one of the people I sent lyrics to on the cassette, doesn't like that song. That song sounds demonic to her. She never we never did anything with it. But I think it paints a picture. As a contrast, shortly before I met her, the next song would be Something I Got in a Dream. I got a lot of songs and dreams.
First recorded version of Death or Hell.
And for me, it represents comfort. That's what I heard in this song.
Okay. Some of these lyrics might be considered dummy lyrics. feel so all alone. Can't I get some peace of mind? Had enough of tragedy. Death or hell can't conquer me. Feel I'm wasting all my time. Pick your battle, stand in line. Life don't have no reason or rhyme. I've had enough of tragedy. Got to reach my destiny. Death or hell can't drag me down. Death or hell can't break me now. Depression will tear me down. No obsession, love my way. Persecution will not stay. Death or hell can't hold me down. Death or hell can't stop me now. Death or hell can't hold me down.
And trouble you, I'll test your patience with one more song. It's quicker, it's only 2 minutes. It's one I dreamed also. I think a lot of the purpose of the music I had back in those days, sometimes 3 times a night, I'd wake up and record it. And I have about 1,000 songs I haven't done much with yet. I think a lot of that was just God was trying to keep me happy, because it gave me a lot of satisfaction. Okay, this is another one from a dream. Even the words came from a dream in this case.
When your last tears fall on the cold around, children laugh, oh children laugh.
That's when your last tear has fallen on the cold, frozen ground. Children laugh. God talking to his children. Me and Kathy. Laugh. Don't cry, laugh.
When your strength is found lacking and there's no more to be found, children laugh the day away. When your spirit's running empty and your soul has run aground, and you can't find an anchor when there's nowhere to be found, when you're running for cover and laugh the fear away.
Just to interpret that song.
Disconnected.
Just to interpret it, when you think you should be laughing and life is going your favor, as you know, it might be about to fall apart. So don't get smug, but when you're just about to cry, don't get too sad, because the last will be first and the first will be last. So, none of those are copyrighted. We never tried to do anything with the song. So if this gets out on the internet and someone writes a song like that, that's fine. Times have changed and the going song styles have changed anyway. Anyway, Kathy heard some of those songs, and she was one of the people that was trying to write lyrics, and she had written with other songwriters. And it's one of those things where you know the first moment you've always known each other. You've heard the stories. And she knew I was married, had tons of children. And, she knew within a couple of weeks that children were being abused, because songwriters have to talk to write songs. They have to tell each other about their lives. And she gave me some lectures about that, and I said, I can't stop it. I can't do anything about it. And she felt appropriately guilty for getting too close to a married guy, and still feels that way, feels quite guilty, especially when it led to breaking up of the marriage. But as Elvis Presley said, can't help falling in love with you. And I took it as something related to God, but I did understand there was a problem, obviously. When she and I started getting a little too close, I reprimanded her, and she didn't take kindly to that, because I was probably doing most of the reaching out. But I was ready to cut it off, and she probably was too. And then another sentence came to mind. Carry on. It's not as if you were doing it in person. Okay, it sounds like an excuse, right? But I had had enough experience by that time with God, and I assumed God was speaking. You could easily say it was the devil, but I took it as being God. And Kathy was just as much like, we're veering out of control here, we gotta slow down. And some things God told her, cool it, quote, cool it. But it's hard to resist a flowing river. How did Elvis say it? When a river flows to the sea, it's awfully hard to stop the water. And we were very careful. The phrase she and I used was taking things into your own hands. Don't take it into your hands. I'm not gonna fly to Pennsylvania and meet with her and get married or whatever, get divorced and get married. And it took more than 20 years of waiting, and now we're not together because it's the right thing, and we never did disobey that. And more than that, God was very open. There was a lot of communication between us and God going on, and I learned how to interpret God's words. And we learned how to play what some people derisively call Bible roulette, because sometimes we don't trust our sentences and things like that, like I said. But I don't think the devil can go into the Bible and help you choose a scripture. But she and I, let's see, okay. So this is how the change occurred. When you really love somebody, and this was real love, the first real love I had ever felt, and I'll ever, you share everything, and when you have disagreements about religion, you can tell it hurts a lot. And perfect love was being spoiled by this religion problem, and she would never trust any Mormons. She never did. She was the one that taught me the term cult. Okay. She's not very tolerant about that religion. I tried to send her the Missionary. She said, well, I hope they have a shield from a gun, or what. I don't remember what she said, but she said, they're not going to go in my house. I thought I could convert her. I told her she was a bad person because she wasn't listening to the Mormons and everything, all that stuff. But finally, must have been a year after we met, I just had to give it up, and I had to give up the church. My best analogy for that, and the one I've always used, is she and I are holding hands, and there's a picket fence between us. That's the change in religion, the difference of religion. And every time we have a disagreement, it's my hand that gets scraped. I don't know why, but it hurt me more than her. So that picket fence had to go away, and it did. And I dropped the church, and it wasn't painful. It wasn't like a lot of the stories we've heard here. I didn't agonize. I had always had faith in church, but I never had any proof, and I didn't need proof. I was full of faith. But I wasn't listening to logic. I think when you have a lot of faith, you don't have to listen to a lot of logic. Even as a Christian, you got to have faith more than knowledge. Unlike what they say, I know the church is true. You don't really have to know it's true. You need to have faith after a certain amount that you're convinced that it's true. Anyway, I won't go into that. I'm not a preacher. Okay, I think next time. This part I'm going to read. Pressure increased within a year of meeting her, and I developed stress-aggravated, eventually life-threatening autoimmune disease, which is called ulcerative colitis. It's like Crohn's disease, as some of you were talking about today. Mm-hmm. The night I told my wife I would not sleep with her anymore, because I had realized I found true love, she ran upstairs, grabbed a 25-pound Kirby vacuum cleaner, and threw it forcefully onto my head from the second story of the house as I started up the stairs. There was blood everywhere. My 5-year-old daughter said, "Oh, Daddy had blood coming out of his head like crazy." ER x-rays showed no fracture, no neck fracture. I did not become paralyzed. She told me in the ER, the wife told me in the ER, she did not remember the incident. Demons were, and I believe her, demons were seen by my 5-year-old daughter around that time when we would argue. Dark, shadowy figures. She's quite an artist, and she still is, and she drew some stick figures for me with fingers and curvy extensions coming out of the fingers. I said, "What are these coming out of the fingers?" I was careful, of course, how I asked her. Pokers. What are pokers? Pokers. Hot pokers. Obviously demons. Again, my autoimmune disease was aggravated by stress. I was still living at home with wife and children. Within the space of a month, I was admitted twice. The first time was because of the colitis. I was told I probably wouldn't survive surgery. He didn't even want to order a surgeon to see me. I don't know any surgeon that would operate on you in this condition. I was losing a pound a day. Kind of like the woman you talked about that can't eat anything, can't drink water. I was a lot that way. I couldn't drink water or eat without having a bowel movement. I remember while I was in the hospital, I counted. I used a piece of toilet paper. I wadded it up each time I had a bowel movement to count. And it was like 19. And my boss that told me I was a hypochondriac told me, "I hear from the nurses upstairs you're exaggerating your numbers. You're a hypochondriac," the hypochondriac thing. Second time I was admitted with atrial fibrillation, a heart arrhythmia, and I was shocked back into normal rhythm. Worst day of my life. Having bowel movements all day long and being tied up in the ICU and unable to get out of bed. It's very hard when you're weak to have bowel movement with a bedpan. My older brother convinced me I would not survive if I stayed in the house, so I rented a room from a wonderful LDS family. I felt free and happy for the first time in my life. The wife would drop off the children, we'd play together and have fun. There were a few family outbursts, such as one that landed me in the police department, again, complicating my career problem. Merle, my supervisor, later told me that any good Army officer simply has to prevent his wife from doing illegal things. You got to control your wife. Which was, in this case, setting the 6-month-old baby, the one that got married last week, onto the hood of the car as I tried to drive away to avoid conflict with her as she was reaching into the car, trying to grab the steering wheel. At her instructions, this was videotaped by my teenage daughter, hoping to use it against me in court. Again, all leading to more stress. Soon I was being told by my GI doctor I should rest all lunch period, take a nap, put in the enema, go upstairs in the call room, sleep as long as you can, an hour or two, so the steroid enema would sink in and help control my disease. No, I was a hypochondriac. Merle was not amused by her having to shoulder the burden of the entire clinic while I slept upstairs. She was not one to tolerate that. She wrote memos calling me hypochondriac, at length filed charges against my credentials, which means saying I was incompetent to work in my specialty and I should be drummed out of the Army. So this was the career coming to a head, falling apart, that had been set in motion years ago from church priorities. Now, Kathy and I tried, a friend of mine told me this may not have been reasonable, but our motto at that point was not by divorce. You're not going to have a divorce. Try to live a separate life in the same house. You'll have the children. You'll all both have access to the children, but it won't be by divorce. But my ex did not have enough faith or trust in me to, I gave her $3,000 a month. I say, buy whatever you want, buy groceries, take care of the family, we'll try to live a separate existence. That was either destined to fail or did fail, and there was a separation and filing for divorce. The next point, I'll try to be real brief. The Army did credentials committee. That's a committee that decides if you can practice. If you're incompetent to practice, they file your name in a big national database, and you'll never get a job again. Because of all these memos, there was an issue, a question of that, and I kind of won the memo, but Merle was, I was late on some of my reports, treatment summaries of radiation therapy, so they set her as my retraining supervisor. She was to be the remediator of my career, and obviously there was conflict of interest. I went to a lawyer. He said, the first time I saw Dr. Wilson, blah, 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 I was sure you would be fair, the hospital would be fair, but now she's a loose cannon, this is, the deck is loaded, and it's unfair. Her husband is the second in charge in the hospital, they're obviously colluding, everything, it was obvious. He said, I'm going to file charges against the hospital. I will threaten your credentials to practice in any specialty. The hospital is shut down if you proceed with this. Unfair here. He said, take this to the commander's office, drop it off, and within a day or two you're going to hear something. Because he knew how things like that worked. And I had orders for DC within probably a week or two. And I knew something was happening. So I got to be retrained in my specialty, as I mentioned earlier. Well, for most of those years, I would take the children for Christmas, but I didn't have contact. There was a career threat. All she had to do was, just like she had to Merle, she'd just call my boss, say something nasty about me, and I would be on the hook again, and I would never practice again. I would never see another patient. So I didn't have contact with her. I didn't have contact with the children except at Christmas time, really for 15 years, 10 to 15 years. If you don't count Christmas, it was 15 years. I didn't talk to my siblings, my brothers. I was hiding out in Washington, D.C., and then in Pennsylvania. I had to hide my past, even in Pennsylvania. Small town, 25,000 people. Gossip travels faster than it does through the telephone lines. So in all this, like I said, I didn't sit down in a restaurant. I didn't have social contact with any other doctors, which would have helped my numbers, more patients, more referrals. My girlfriend at that time, and really for most of the time, was acting as a career advisor, career consultant. She knew I had a reputation problem. I've always been a maverick. Maybe I've erased that a little bit in recent years, but you would have known that 10 years ago. I'll skip a lot of this conjecture about why did God lead me to fall in love, blah, blah, blah. But it did help the children. I was told by close contact, secondhand, that the child abuse greatly improved. And the wife is an excellent grandma now. She's everything a grandma needs to be. She lives 10 houses down the street. And she's able to be a grandma in a house that I own. And I rent to her for free. And we have nothing to fight about anymore. There's no career at stake. She's a good support for me. She thanks me every time I pay for a meal or anytime I do something nice for her or the grandkids. I live next door to 5 of my grandchildren. That's part of the happy ending mode that I won't go into. I told you about the career helping. I never lost contact with patients, so I was able to keep practicing. thanks to the failure at work. Okay, so I was just really addressing the whys and wherefores, but I think it's pretty self-explanatory by this point. If things had gone on, I think our children would have been more wounded. And which is worse, living 10 or 15 years without a father or being constantly demeaned and abused? I don't know, but God knows. So let me just say maybe 2 more paragraphs. So why did this all happen? One could argue it hurt the children to lose their father. I can only speculate, but I think it's about abusive relationships and the importance of at least trying to gracefully extract yourself from them. Probably somebody listening to this will be in that situation. And I will say, confidential, nobody's listening, right? That applies to Kathy. Okay. So she had quite a good empathy about spousal abuse. Okay, don't repeat that. Okay, she would melt, including by finding sources of support if you're in that situation. Especially me, I was losing my church family. I was losing my regular family, my children, and my siblings and my parents for church reasons, because life may well not be easy after such a transition and leaving or losing a spouse. So if you're abused, you still have a home to live in, and what if you decide to start out on your own? It can't possibly be easy. God gave me someone in advance, starting 10 years earlier when I started writing songs, really. So to summarize, what's this talk about? It's about being delivered from abuse. I needed a support person during that journey. And for career rehabilitation, the reason I had to be careful from then on, if anyone got wind, you have a large family, let's check into your background. Oh, you got discipline in the army, you can't see patients anymore, there's the emotional rescue part. It's nice to be alive. I'm glad I had someone to help me get through the illness, which is much better nowadays, by the way, for the last 10 years. While I was hiding out from Mormons in the East Coast, I never thought about the Mormon church while I was there for 20 years. I didn't have to think about it, and I was grateful for that. Now I have more time, and I can think about it if I need to. So this talk is partly about support and delivery from abuse, how God can reach out. Now my talk is also partially about the inadequacy of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to provide our basic needs in life, at least people with high goals, lots of stress, high-stress career, obeying all the rules, trying to have a big family. There are commitments the church forces you to make that put the church first, and that crashed partly, and my own inadequacies crashed my career. Okay. So really, it all fell apart before it all came together. Is it there? It's kind of like the phoenix. The phoenix gets burned, and then the phoenix comes back to life. Kathy and I always called me, there's old Steve and there's new Steve, and I changed a lot through that. And I had to. There was a lot of challenges. I'm grateful for all of them. You always look back on the most difficult challenges with the greatest glee because you're past them. So God dismantled my relatively happy, at least I was blissful Latter-day Saint, happy member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But in rebuilding my life, it fulfilled me even more, much more, by leading me through a journey of not just eventually family reconciliation, but reconciliation to Him and understanding of how to talk to me, how to talk to Him, how to ascertain His will and understand the Bible, and how to truly reach salvation and get to heaven after I die. My brother, who's an atheist, when he left the Mormon church, he emailed me today after reading this. He says, I was inspired. And he's never said that. And he's a very hard atheist. You explain something clearly miraculous, he says, it's true. It's true. It's valid, but it's not literal. It's just a figment of your imagination. But he was touched by reading this little outline. And that's all I have. Anything else?
So how did you come to Christ? Then
It's the picket fence. The picket fence thing. Now, I stayed undercover. I didn't attend brick and mortar church for about 15 years. I listened to radio broadcasts, but I had to keep undercover, just like a CIA agent. And so I was hungry when I started searching for churches 5 years ago. The pastors, I have to go to 4 different churches. One pastor would say, "I can tell you're hungry to hear more about the church." I still don't know the proper name. Are we evangelical Protestants? Are we biblical Christians? I don't know the names. I'm still learning, and it's been 20 years, and I'm glad to learn everything. I'm still hungry to learn more about the Bible. And I understand the key is the Bible. My brother, who's a Mormon, last night in one of our weekly Zoom meetings, we got into a little argument about the Bible. He says, "So it's that simple, huh?" I was talking about how prophets are always changing their mind and changing the programs of the church. And I said, "I thought prophets are supposed to know God's will." And he said, "Oh, is the Bible that simple? It's just in there and it's all 100% correct?" I said, "Yes, it is." He said, "You don't have to prepare or read other texts." I said, "Yeah, you read other references, you get a concordance, a dictionary, and you pray first and you get inspiration." Aha, you have to have inspiration. That's the key, Yeah, it's that simple. I sent him a copy of Through the Bible, 5-year program this morning. Maybe he'll catch on. But I converted because I needed to leave the Mormon faith. And my girlfriend was very close to God, and still is. And I needed to be like her. So whatever she was, I wanted to be. Made it real easy.
Why did you have to be like your her as opposed to your atheist brother?
Because I loved her. It was true love.
Mm-hmm.
And it's still true love. It's still right here. We can't talk hardly at all because of family. I'm a granddad now. Mm-hmm. And she would just be appalled and horrified by the interaction I have with my Mormon relatives. She can't tolerate it. Mm-hmm. She sees Mormonism as demonic. She can't study it. She can't read anything about it. Even negative. She can't read negative against it. It's just against her being. Mm-hmm. So it's because of love. Like I said, it made it real easy. I didn't have to analyze the policies or anything. Just be like her. But the Bible is an easy model to follow. It doesn't make it hard. Does that clarify pretty well?
Well, Paul warned the Corinthians of them falling away from the simplicity that's in Christ. Mm. Yeah. Because others would come and preach another Jesus, have another spirit.
Yeah, maybe you could ask if she was Buddhist, would I become Buddhist? I don't know. I don't know that one, but we had so much direct communication with God, and I still know how to do that. Mm-hmm. I don't need it as much. It doesn't, like Barbara Dunbar said in her testimony, "Why do other people in the Mormon temple have revelation?" I don't. God told her, "You don't need it," and now I hardly need it at all. I picked up Ray off the street. He was homeless last month, and I didn't ask God first when I said, "You want to stay at my house?" It just seemed right, and I didn't. It wasn't a big dilemma. He's a nice guy, easy to live with. So I don't have too many dilemmas. 2 weeks ago I prayed about, God, shall I cancel the talk? Jonah was thrown overboard after 1 month. Someone got sick last month, so I thought maybe someone's going to be sick. It'll be canceled in February or in March. Let me ask ahead of time. So I asked, the word shall be given to you. That was the answer from First Chronicle, I think. Just the Bible roulette. But so sometimes I have questions that involve, I ask God things when you can't possibly know the answer because it involves the future or uncertainty or people's hearts. And that's when you need it. But most of the time, to live a simple retired life, you don't need a lot of direct speech from God.
So how did you find out about Grace Community Bible Church? And how did you start going there?
Good question. Yeah, my daughter-in-law goes to MOPS, that's Mothers of Preschool Children at Grace. Mm-hmm. She lives next door. She's a Mormon. She was going to be here tonight, but we'll be watching it instead. I saw a broadcast, Elaine Pelican, I think, she was talking about children and technology. I saw it while I was in my son's and my daughter-in-law's home the night it was being live broadcast. And I noticed a church behind, set up for a worship team behind the speaker, and I asked my son, I said, is that a church? He said, yeah, that's a Grace Community Bible Church. We go there every month for MOPS, for preschoolers. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, if there's a church that they know and they trust, I'm going to go to that church. I'm checking out Calvary right now also, but it's a great church. I love the people there, especially the Flores and who else. They're all very good to me. But that's why. Yeah, and you go for recommendations. Mm-hmm. You hear about a lot of these talks mention things like that. Mm-hmm. They mention Calvary, and I take cues. I try to learn from other people.
Did you ever get your name removed from?
Oh yeah, I didn't go into that, but it was quite simple. I just wrote a letter, and within a few weeks, I got a letter in response. I didn't want my ex thinking she would have an eternal connection to me. Well, not just me, Kathy didn't want it, thinking I was eternally connected to her. But a miracle happened with that experience. My father, the stake president, had always tried to convince me, stay Mormon or break off the relationship with Kathy. You have children to worry about, things like that. And that's a whole part of my talk that I deleted. But he got a phone call. Apparently he got a phone call from the church records department, probably after I'd written the letter. And the lady that was the attendant for that phone call to remove my name from the church records had lived in the exact same house I lived in Hawaii for the military, 274A Hibiscus Court, Honolulu, Hawaii. And she told them that was the house I lived in. And somehow through that, he developed a testimony, as Mormons would say it, a testimony that Steve was being careful. As my brother told me last night, he told my brother also, that God knows who Steve is. And he's going to take care of him. And that's how my dad described it. God's going to take care. Don't worry about Steve. My dad's a big worrier. So anyway, that was part of the removal of the records and giving my dad some assurance from sleepless nights. Because my brother had become an atheist, How many kids are you going to lose to eternity, Mm-hmm. So there's lots of parts I deleted from this talk. That's one of them. Yeah, maybe I'll write a book on it.
Did you end up getting baptized as a Christian?
No, I haven't. I haven't. I was attending, when I first moved here, I was attending Lutheran down the street from me in Taylorsville. POP Lutheran, Prince of Peace Lutheran. They were just about to get to the baptism lessons when I had to switch churches. Pennsylvania Church was in town for a while. And my doctrinal understanding of the Bible is I don't need to, because I went under the water once and it's not necessary for salvation. So maybe we'll get to that at Grace Bible Church, that issue. I'm sure someone will bring it up to me. But even from what I've heard recently at Grace, I don't think it's it's certainly not mandatory to get to heaven. Obviously, there are reasons you want to signal that you're a believer. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you guys have anything? Okay.
Are we at 2 hours?
No, let's pull the battery from that clock. All right, would you like to close this in prayer?
Oh, sure. Thank you. God, we thank you for your blessings. Perhaps your spirit that's been here tonight, I hope so. Thank you for guiding me. I do feel that. Thank you for answering my prayer that I would be relatively understandable. And hopefully we ask that this will make an impact on the people that most need it in their lives. That they will find ways of getting support, even when leaving the Mormon Church or even possibly from any abuse situation. They need support, just like coming to this fellowship. We all need support. I needed it very badly. I had very little of it for many years, but a wonderful woman filled in that regard. But please give us grace and thy guidance when we seek it. Please bless us with more even more faith than we already have. Please bless us with faith sufficient to receive your blessings. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you.